Was. Hey Ashton, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So welcome to Go Ask Sawyer. This is a podcast basically just creating a safe space for people to share stories. And today we are focused on Ashton. This is my friend for a few years, and Ashton and I are going to be talking about boundaries, something that I'm working on in my life and something I felt Ashton was good at in our discussion. So Ashton, why don't you say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone. I'm Ashton. I have known Jamie since 2017. So we have just passed our 6-year mark of knowing each other. Feel
Good.
super fortunate to know such a powerful female. And a little bit about myself. I think one fun fact is that I've lived in 4 or 5 states all around America. So have a bit of an interesting perspective of just different locations, different geographical preferences, the way people kind of live and operate day to day. I also have a background in college athletics and am a resident physician. So a couple fun things on my life track that I think have set the stage nicely for this specific topic.
I like all that. What do you want to tell us about yourself? I know I sent you some questions. Is there something that what are 3 things you want to tell us about yourself besides how awesome I am? Just more about me.
Um, I think one thing that I value about myself is my very deep loyalty. I've always been found to be the person that will drop kind of whatever's going on to make things happen for other people or get things done for other people. I think that bodes well nicely for the phrase kind of friendships, quality friendships over quantity friendships. And I think that bodes to be true. That I'll just kind of drop whatever to make things happen for other people. So that's one thing that I value about myself. Other fun things about myself, I'm not too sure what's fun day to day. I don't feel like so many things are fun, but maybe.
What about you had told me a favorite quote of yours? What was that quote? Do you remember it? Because I didn't write it
down. My favorite quote is, "You're gonna miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And I've obviously, in the athletic realm is where that comes up very nicely, but I've found that to be true in almost everything in my life. Down to something as simple as you don't know that the answer is going to be no unless you ask it.
Love that. I just love that.
Yeah. I think it's a great quote. It's pretty applicable to nearly everything.
I am trying to live more by that, but I'm still like so scared, or I still go all the way in my head about things. And it's just like, why not just ask it or do it? And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, then at least you know. But I really love that quote.
Me too.
Totally. And when we met in 2017, we met at the Wisconsin Athletic Club. And from what I remember, I was subbing a class. So for those of you in the world, I teach group fitness is one of my many other things I do. And I used to teach like an interval strength class, and I was subbed a class, and Ashton and her husband, John, were there, and they were swearing a lot, which made me think like, okay, I'm doing a good job. And I feel like that's how we met. And then after she was done swearing, she was like, so when do you teach normally? And then we became friends.
So thanks for putting up with all of my cuss words for the last hour. What are your other classes that you teach?
Look, the more you swear, I feel like I'm doing a good job. So it makes me feel good.
It's an outward expression of love if I'm in a workout.
I appreciate that. So if I'm thinking back to like one thing like you love about yourself, and you talked about like how loyal you are, I think that really kind of comes into our topic of boundaries today. What does a boundary mean to you? Let's just start with that. What does boundaries mean to you?
Yeah, I think like in the holistic sense, now that I've done so much self-reflection about boundaries, a boundary to me is how am I not only going to have self-preservation, but what things need to be in place so I have self-elevation. And And, it's not necessarily like boundary kind of has a bad connotation. I feel like it's like we're blocking things from happening. But I've kind of taken a totally different view on this over the years of like kind of looking back on the different boundaries I've had to set in my life. And it's more so what have I had to do to make myself the best version of myself so I can self-elevate and therefore be better for other people even. So I think without defining the word, that's kind of what setting boundaries means to me. So I kind of change it and make it a little bit more glass half full and a little bit more optimistic than the normal social connotation of the word.
I really like that way of looking at it, and I do think you're right. The world has this view of like boundary as a bad thing or something that, no, we're not going to talk about this, or a way to keep people out. But I feel like we've talked about this where a boundary is an instruction manual on how you treat yourself. And in turn, you're teaching others how to treat you. And once I've been like learning that, it's easier to set them or to understand why. And I think that's the other thing too. Why am I setting this boundary? Why can I do these things with this person, but not with this person? And it's just also, it's like, how do I respect myself? And I'm going to teach you how to respect me. And if you can't, then we'll have the conversation. But if you are not telling people or showing people or teaching people how to treat you, that's when you're just getting angry and frustrated and upset. We didn't talk about this last time, but my therapist and I just talked about boundaries, and she said you'll always know when either you're crossing a boundary or someone is, when you're angry, frustrated, or irritated. That like, feeling is your body's way of letting you know, like, hey, something's been crossed, and you like need to like self-examine that. So, what happened in your life, or who did you maybe have to set a boundary with that was hard for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to talk about one specific event because I think it'll highlight a lot of these things nicely. But I just want to say that once you kind of set this system that we'll talk about today a little bit more, boundaries get set without you really like thinking about them anymore. I'm sure I've set
Yep.
numerous boundaries since this big event. And now that I have a different outlook on it and the steps of how to evaluate it in my head, I think I probably just do it naturally. But definitely want to highlight the one that kind of made me realize how to set a boundary, why it's important, and then which just turned my gears to change my outlook on what actually boundary setting is and why it actually truly is self-elevation. I set a boundary with my mom when I was 18. And there's obviously like most relationships, and this goes for family members, I would say, or like we talked about multiple times before this, are the hardest people to set boundaries with.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
I do think in society we're taught family gets to have whatever access they want. And when it comes to families or parents, you shouldn't say no.
Right. It's like a underlying level of respect. I mean, I hear the quote all the time, well, they're my family. So I feel like that just kind of sets a precedent that because people are family, they're allowed to do XYZ to you, which just makes the whole topic of setting boundaries with super, super close friends or family even more difficult. But what I found was my incident was quite extreme, which actually forced me to, and I'm happy to lay this out a little bit later, but the stepwise of kind of how to set boundaries was more of a self-reflection for me after this event. My situation was so extreme that I actually skipped the first few steps and kind of went to the third and set the boundary and then kind of reflected my way back, which was an interesting way to kind of come about learning all of this. But basically with my mom, right before I'd left for college, she was starting some what I would consider manipulative behaviors. There was money involved. There was friendships that she had worked her way into and kind of skewed views of other people towards me. And And then obviously the thing for me was the heightened, like I just had graduated high school, didn't have a great relationship with my father at this time because I had moved away from him. My parents were divorced. Um, and also trying to go off to college and be a new freshman D1 athlete, you know, meet new people, get situated in a new city, move, kind of all piled on me all at once. And just the different intertwinings of things that were happening with my mom over a 1 or 2 month period of time, um, led me to be more emotional than I had ever been. I cried all the time, and I wasn't previously a crier.
I was gonna say, are you a crier?
Yeah, no. It's not me, you know? And I would cry, and I couldn't even really put words on it, which is what we can definitely kinda come back to. Um, but basically, I had just floods of emotions, that I had never really experienced. I didn't know how to mentally make sense of them. But all I knew was every single time my mother was around, brought up, whatever, it flooded me with things that caused me to be not the best version of myself, essentially. Um, and were super functionally limiting in the fact that I had a very rough transition into like meeting people, having fun, like learning my new city I was in, all these things. So I kind of moved past some of these easier steps of evaluating your emotions and just determined that I needed to, number one, try to make things work with my mom with a third party. And then if not, I needed to set a boundary and be super, super strict with it. And for me at this time, it was more like self-preservation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that 1 or 2 months just after graduating high school went for me. It was not pleasant, but I feel grateful for it now looking back and have learned so many things from it.
So what was the hard boundary you had to set? Because I remember you saying, I think you had to go to therapy, and that still just didn't necessarily work, but your therapist had said to set a boundary. And that was like before boundaries were like the cool word.
Right. Yeah, that after I had looked back on all this, that is kind of how it works. So I, in my mind, because she was family, because she was important to me, had a great relationship before all this, I was like, well, maybe we just need a third party. There's too many heightened emotions, too many things clearly that I needed to say, she needed to say. So I took it upon myself to schedule like a dual therapy to kind of just have a safe space to talk about some of these things or things that maybe I was interpreting that she was doing or vice versa. It was super not productive, unfortunately. And I remember at the end, she just got up and kind of left. And there was almost no resolution, which put a whole different pit in my stomach, I think. And I think the therapist could read that. And I just kind of remember sitting there in silence for a couple minutes with the therapist. And I remember her just saying, like, I want to leave you with, knowing that things will get better. Time does heal some. She's like, but I think it's going to be very important for you to set boundaries. And I kind of left there and I was like, I have no idea what she's talking about. How am I going to set a boundary with my mother? I'm not even living in the same state as her anymore. All these things. So I kind of went down that route without really understanding what route I was going down.
And I think you just said something really important, that you had that pit in your stomach. I remember you saying something about you had just kind of started going off feeling.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. And I think it does become like an emotional reaction. Like I think your body, when you are in tune with what's going on, it becomes much more obvious, these like emotions that manifest as like actual pains or feelings within you. Yeah. So I felt that super strong. And I also kind of, not sure that I did really good reflection on what actually a boundary was at that time, but I just remember her saying that and being like, I don't know, but I think that's right. Like that's where I am right now. Every single interaction with my mom for a 6 or 8 week period had been just destructive for me. So I ended up telling my mom that no way, no how could I manage seeing her, talking to her, anything right now. And I didn't put an end to it. I didn't put expectations to it. I didn't attach my emotions to it. I didn't do a lot of the things that I think are foundational to actual boundary setting after I've had the chance to look back. But
Do you
I
think
think
you had to in that moment? Like, do you think, you know how sometimes you're like, I just need to close the door right now because you're like so intertwined? Do you think that's also, because I guess I'm just all thinking of people listening right now, like, how do I take my emotion out of it? And I do think it's important that sometimes you just need to shut the door for a while. I can always reopen it, but like I need it to shut right now.
yeah, I think it's super important. I think a lot of this, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit more, comes back to emotions, an
Mhm.
evaluation of your emotions. And I think in this situation, and I'm sure other people have very similar situations as far as emotions are concerned, just being too intertwined with everything, that you do end up with more anger and more irritability and more whatever. And you can't see the glass the way it is. You can't see the situation the way it is. So shutting the door right now to give you time and space to heal so then you can actually evaluate the emotions that you were having that led to that point. I think
Yeah.
that's a really I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like some situations it's easy to kind of walk through, step 1, 2, 3, 4 of this, which I've figured out at this point. But
Mhm.
sometimes situations just get intense really fast. And sometimes intense emotions aren't necessarily the ones that you want to be evaluating.
Yeah.
And
Because they're
so,
not real. They're just they're your reactive emotions. And I
right.
think when you're so close, like you and your mom were so close and the situation was so big, those emotions you were feeling weren't all the way real. So you
Right.
said, okay, no, no contact. What? How did she? Has she ever re-entered your life? How did she re-enter your life, or what happened after that?
Yeah. Um, so, the first semester of college, I said, don't come to my soccer games. Don't show up on campus. Don't call. Don't text. So I did. I shut the door. I think after that first semester, number one, after I had gotten accustomed to college classes, accustomed to
Mhm.
traveling with soccer, had established like a rapport with teammates, like all those things, I had a chance to have that part of my life settled. Could then actually evaluate what in the world happened that led me to that point of feeling like I needed to close the door.
Mhm.
And I think at that point is when I started to figure out the true process of events of how it maybe should go to go a little smoother. Um, and the next step that I found was how am I going to allow her back in? To what degree do I want her back in?
Mhm.
What's going to be healthy for me for that transition, but also just moving forward.
Mhm.
Um, and so what I've come to the conclusion is after you've set a boundary, it's important to then evaluate those things and figure out, okay, well, what is it that I need them to do or give me, not necessarily in a physical sense,
Mhm.
to allow me to feel safe and just without a lability of emotions.
And if I can just
Um,
the idea of what do I need to feel safe, I think is so important. And not like safe you're gonna hurt me, but even just like spiritually, emotionally, when I'm with you, like I wanna be able to feel not all sorts of stuff in my body. So like evaluating what are things I need to feel safe when I'm with you.
right. Like how, what do I need so that way the emotions I feel are regulated and understood and all those things. Um, so what I ended up doing and figuring out at this point is do I need to or want to lock out my mom forever from my life? Not necessarily.
Mhm.
My mom has some fantastic qualities. Um, and so I think at this point I figured out, well, I need to sit down and come up with the things that are going to allow me to allow her back in and keep me feeling safe. So I started to come up with, how am I going to feel once she resolves the financial situation? How am I going to feel when she resolves XYZ friendship situation that she injected herself into? Whatever. And I came up with quantifiable things, basically a task
Mhm.
list for lack of a better word, um, of things that I needed her to do to show me that I was important enough that she would resolve these issues, but also that hopefully we weren't going to do them again and that
Mhm.
I trusted her to maintain the distance and maintain the parameters that I had set. Um, so in some ways, it was self-preservation, making me feel safe, but also having her complete these things to know that I'm important to her.
Mhm.
Like, our relationship is important.
Mhm.
And if you're not gonna do these things, then I'm gonna read that as, well, then our relationship moving forward isn't important enough for you to do them.
I think that's what you're saying is when you tell someone, here are the expectations, then it's clear to them and it's clear to you. If we don't give, I do think we forget about that a lot with families or even friends or relationships. If I'm not telling you my expectations of specific things, like for me, I like when people are on time. Or if you're not going to be on time, let me know. It's a thing I have, it's how I feel. But if I've never told you that and you're late all the time and now I'm mad, I've never told you that. How would you know? And in my head, I'm like, well, you should know this. Why? Maybe in your life, you're like, this is just how I roll. This is just what I do. So I think it's really important that here's what I need from you. And if I can't get that, then this will happen. And were you prepared that if she couldn't match what you needed, that she maybe couldn't re enter at that time?
I can For me, yes. I can understand maybe in not as of heightened situation as this, that part might be harder.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, because I slammed the door and I slammed it so sharply, and I learned how to live my life at that stage without my mom completely,
Mm-hmm.
um, I was more hopeful that she would do these things, but I didn't have that real sense of fear that might exist, if the door didn't get all the way closed. Um, okay, well, what if she doesn't do these things? Because I was already living that world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's a great point to bring up, and the fact of, if you don't set a super hard boundary, it's just, we're not going to talk about that situation when we're together, or we're not going to go to that place when we're together because it does XYZ to me, or
Mm-hmm.
other things that maybe aren't as severe as dropping a door. Um, I feel like setting the expectations list might feel a little different.
Yeah. And then it's clear. Everyone knows what page we're on. Okay,
Right.
so she was able to do the things and she was able to come back in your life.
Yep.
How is it with her back in your life? Like, has she tried to cross boundaries since, or when a boundary gets broken, or how have you maneuvered with her back in your life?
Yeah, it's different. I will say that it's different than before. Um, but different in a good way. This is kind of
Okay.
how I imagined it. Um, I feel safe and in control. I feel like at any point in time, if there are triggering things for me, I'm able to leave, to not feel the pit in my stomach or feel that I'm doing it because she's my mom.
Mm.
Um, so I feel like a lot of good has come out of setting the boundary, giving the expectations, having her achieve her expectations, and allowing her back in slowly. Um, the relationship is not the same, but I don't think that that necessarily has relationship to the actual boundary setting. I think that that has to do with the situation that happened that led to the boundary setting.
Okay.
Um, so I feel like, um, it's been different and good. Has she tried to cross boundaries? Sure. There's still
Has she used people in your life to cross boundaries?
That's another situation that's been super interesting, to kind of navigate. Um, there are ways that she speaks, and things and phrases she says that are very easy for me to pick up on at this point, of what information she's trying to gather, for instance.
Like fishing, right? Like she's fishing for information or she's trying to get something.
Yep. And I feel like it's very easy for me to pick up on her fishing because I lived with it for my whole life. Um, it might not be so clear to other people what her intent with that information is, or how she might use it. Um, so that's been where, um, John has sort of been involved in this. at this point, and he's kind of gone through his little hump and learning of boundary setting and what it means in this specific situation for him. And I saw it kind of happening. We moved back close to my mom within the last couple years, and John was here for the first little bit of it, and he's since moved away for his work. But that first year that he was here, he had a little bit more flexibility in his schedule, which my mom knew. And so they spent more time together and, I don't know, time on the phone, planning things or activities, whatnot.
And up until this, you hadn't like said, John, do not engage with my mom, or like, here's the issue. Like, you just kind of let their relationship as a son-in-law just go.
Yeah, he knew but all of this stuff with my mom in the boundary setting happened well before I got married. So, I mean, he had known to some degree that the relationship was rocky and I'd kind of set boundaries and that there was manipulative behaviors and stuff like that. But I really didn't start allowing her back into my life until maybe 1 or 2 years after we got married. So it was kind of all fresh for him.
Okay. And the reason I am asking, because I want you to talk about this. Let's say someone sets a boundary. Let's say myself. I set a boundary with a friend and they're not happy with it necessarily, but they keep trying to go into other friends who don't. It's like this person doesn't understand boundaries, so they're going to manipulate other people to get the information they're trying to get. And I do think that happens with people that aren't used to having others say no to them, or all of a sudden people don't get access to you the way they used to. And so they try manipulating other people. But then I have to remember, I can't control other people and I can't tell you how to be with that person. So I think what I'd like you to speak about, if you could, is how do you help, or how do you keep your boundary clear without putting your perspective and your thoughts on other people? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
I felt like I was talking in circles.
No, that made perfect sense to me. I mean, it comes down to one word, and that's trust. But how it looks or how it goes could be very different, obviously, depending on the situation. So, I mean, I can speak about how it kind of went with John, and basically, I'm looking down on him learn how to handle the situation. It was almost like a deja vu, like I'm looking at myself doing it 10 years before, which was very interesting. But it came down to trust. Like I trusted him. I trusted his judgment. Yes, his judgment in the situation may or may not have been as good as mine because I'd been through this. But I trusted him to, when he ran into issues, to trust me, essentially. So, I had given him a brief, like, she's, has manipulative behaviors, she has great qualities too. Spend time with her. Don't give her too much information. She can sometimes use it against you. And I don't think he truly understood. And I left it kind of vague just because I didn't really want to control him. I wanted him to kind of figure it out and sort through it and ask me if he needed help. Because I knew there was nothing in my life that she could truly do, because you're right, I had my boundaries set so hard that if she was going to interfere with something in my life, the boundary is already there and I knew how to stop it.
Okay.
So, at the beginning, he would naturally give her more information than she probably needed about other people or things we were doing or places we're going or timing of things. Just all the things that I'm sure most people can relate to with a manipulative person that they've come across in their life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she used a piece of information that John had given her, to her advantage or a way that she wanted to use it that he didn't anticipate her to, that it was totally like an aha moment for him. And he came and he was like, I can't believe she did that. And I'm probably pretty sure I laughed and was like, I can, And
but you had to let him learn. Like you had to and I think that's the hardest thing when we watch someone we care about going through something, but it's like, I can't tell you because this is my perspective.
Yeah, I can't tell you because the emotions are inside of me and the way it makes me feel is inside of me. We can't deliver emotions to another person, right? We can we can describe emotions, but it's been said how many times over again that like emotions truly can't be described with words or,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, yeah, so that was an interesting thing. And so as he went along, he started to basically trust me more and more about advice on how to set boundaries with her. Um, and so I would say, oh yeah, that's not a great scenario. Maybe next time try not giving her, the timing of the event that you're going to or things like that. And over time things got better. He learned. He now picks up on every small manipulative way that she's doing things. Um, and I will say there was probably numerous phone calls where, he had her on speakerphone and was letting her talk and ask things and looked at me for help. And I would just shake my head like, no, maybe not. Like, let's not respond to that one, and he would laugh and kind of divert the question. And so we did a little bit of like that type of learning, but he's a smart cookie too. And he kind of picked up on things I would explain or tell him, or give him examples of how she might use things or has used things against me. And he's very quickly learned to kind of set boundaries in the same way that I have with her, probably not as strongly because there's not the intense emotion um,
or the situation that happened between you two.
right. But he's very in tune with like what is going on with me. And so now sometimes when, for example, when we're at her house or something and I'm getting triggered or getting feelings from emotions, I can simply just look at him and he knows like within the next 5 minutes, like we're done there.
We're going to be done. Yeah.
We're going to be done. Yep. And so it's kind of a nice thing now that I let him go through it and he knows to what degree it affects me, but how much in tune I am with myself now and how I eject myself from the situation for self-preservation and self-elevation. And I think that it works.
So do you think this situation has also just helped you be better at setting boundaries just in general? Like you did say it just feels natural now when you're, again, it's teaching people how to treat you and also teaching yourself how to treat you. So do you think it's helped you in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point I've kind of come up with like a little, couple step process of, oh, that didn't feel great. And now it's okay, let's evaluate that emotion and what action do I think led me to have that emotion? Was it something someone said? Is it the environment? Is it this specific group of people? Is it, what is it? What's the action? And then what emotion did I feel? And trying to figure out why I felt that. And that's why I think a lot of this comes back to your emotions, your self-reflection of your emotions. Um, and once you've determined that, what the emotion is and why you felt it, then I think actually moving forward in this process is easier. And I think it's almost foundational that you do that first step, because that allows you to figure out where to put the boundary, like what I would consider the location of the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
In a totally different setting. As an example, a friend talks about their ex who was also your best friend or something like that, like something that you're involved in that doesn't make you feel great, but you're supporting of both that person that's talking to you and someone else. Let's say maybe it's just that specific thing. It's not actually the person, or big things that they're doing. And so, if you came to the conclusion that just talking about X, just that thing is what generates that emotion in you, that then doesn't allow you to be the best version of yourself in the friendship, that's how you know where to set the boundary or the location of the boundary. So that way, when you go to communicate the boundary to the person, you can do all the things. You can explain to them, hey, when we talk about X, it makes me feel X. And I think that part is really important because if you don't attach your emotion to it, I don't think it grounds the level of the situation for the person that you're trying to set the boundary with.
And really make it about you, right? Like this is not about you, like you're not, but I'm feeling this way.
Right. And it's like that if you put it that way, it sounds selfish, but it truly is. It's a self-preservation, so that way I can still be a part of your life and I can still be an amazing friend or partner or spouse or family member to you. Um, and so it's being true to yourself. Like, what is the emotion? And I really truly need to avoid that emotion to be the best version of me.
Mhm.
Um, so, defining where that boundary is and then attaching the emotion to it for that person and just say, yeah, this is totally about feelings I'm getting. It has nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything wrong. I just want to let you know that this is the situation. And for the next, 1 or 2 months, you can even put a time frame on it. I would really appreciate if you would just avoid that totally so I can be the best version of me.
And I think all too often with it, I have a horrible cough, and I'm really glad I have a mute button over here. Um, I think that's really important because so often we get, and I find this in friendships more often, I walk away feeling so depleted. Like I walk away from people like, oh, I feel drained. I feel empty. I don't want to walk away from that, but I ignore all those feelings and I just keep going to hang out with that person or that group or keep going to that same place instead of acknowledging, wait, I don't want to feel depleted when I leave this person. So how do I need to show up differently? Maybe it's the location we go to. Maybe it's drinking. Maybe it's stuff we talk about. Um, and I think so often this happens in friendships and we don't even realize because, well, once you're my friend, we're just friends and this is just the way it's going to be. And it's so important and empowering to really think I want to create all friendships that lift me higher. My friend Amy, who was just on the other day, we talked about high vibrational friendships. And I think I don't know if I talked about this with you or not, but what if you have low vibrational relationships and high vibrational relationships? What if all your relationships were high vibrational relationships? You walked away from every conversation thinking, man, that felt good. And I think a lot of that comes down to setting boundaries, having respect for yourself, and teaching the other person how to treat you. So that's why I think this conversation is so important because I truly believe from what I'm seeing that we do not know how to set boundaries with people because it feels negative. It feels like I'm hurting you or I'm trying to keep you out when really you're just trying to create a safe space for yourself. And maybe eventually, like you just brought up the example of the friend, like with the divorce, maybe eventually you can talk about it. But right now, it's just not making me feel great. And that's also, like you said, I want to keep this friendship, but I don't want to walk away feeling, or like, I got nothing out of that. And not that we always need to get something out of people, but you should walk away from a friend or a partner or I was going to say a job, but I don't know if we can all have jobs like that where it was like, man, oh my gosh, scared me.
Sorry.
You're fine. Or we just feel good or we just feel good. So you've told the story and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. What advice would you give someone who's like, you know what? I want to start this today, but I don't know where to start or I don't know what to do. What is something that what advice could you give someone today?
Yeah, I really want to boil it down to emotions and listening to your emotions. I think it's easy for someone to go like, "Oh, well, okay, that didn't feel great." Just like don't see that person anymore. And I feel like that's almost like fictitious boundary setting, like you don't want to do self-evaluation of your emotions. I think the true constructive boundary setting that allows you to uplift that relationship that you're trying to boundary set within is evaluating what actually am I feeling and why am I feeling that way? And I kind of just want everyone to hone in on that as like why that is the true step one. And I am more than happy to admit that that is not the process that I underwent all of this. This was a lot of self reflection and looking back on, oh, that kind of happened, but I didn't actually think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if I knew all of this, it wouldn't have led to such a strong door being slammed down.
Right.
Um, So I guess my piece of advice to boundary setting is self-reflection of your emotions. Like, okay, that felt weird and bad, but like what actually were you feeling? Did you get a pit in your stomach? Were you sad? Were you fearful? Were
Mm.
you so angry? Were you frustrated? Did it make you more irritable? Like, what was it? And like, what specific action or thing or place or whatever was it? Because that's the driving force of setting like really, really good constructive boundaries. Um, that should uplift a relationship rather than just like slamming a door closed, which is the societal way of thinking a boundary is.
Mm-hmm. And I've done that. I like to slam doors real hard and then I walk away. Um, and I don't want to do that anymore. Like I've definitely done that in relationships. That's how my last two relationships almost ended. And I don't want to do that because then I'm just going to repeat something else later, or I'm not going to know why I slammed the door. And if the friendship or relationship means anything to me, and I'm not saying what I'm feeling, well, then I'm not respecting the other person either, or myself. So yeah, that the slamming of the door is definitely one of those, and examining the emotions. I
Yeah,
need to get
totally.
better at
It
that.
comes down to emotions. I think clear communication and soft communications doesn't have to be a screaming match. If you've done step one and you've evaluated emotions and what got you there, should be a clear communication. Hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is why I'm feeling it. You know, this is what I need from you for me to be the best version of me. Um, and put a time course on it or not. And if things don't go well, that's kind of when you move on to the next one. Okay, well, then this is the hard boundary I'm setting, and these are the expectations that I have for you to kind of like allow me to lower or take away that really hard boundary.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people will find that you don't necessarily need to go to the expectations phase of boundary setting to allow people back in if we do the step one and step two and clearly communicate and evaluate ourselves before we approach a situation and already have heightened emotions. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I want people to kind of get out of it is truly it's self-evaluation and then just being a really good communicator.
Yeah, communication is key, and I want to be better at it. I feel like I'm really good at it sometimes, and then sometimes I'm just so bad. So I think that's great. Like if someone's listening today and it's like, what can I do? Just take the whole day and evaluate when something comes up. Maybe write it down or just, oh, that felt weird. Why? Like just start tapping in and then going forward from there. Um, Anything else? Any other tips before I ask you my last big question?
Ooh, big question. Not any true tips. I think we've hit all the stuff that I think is the most like high yield for starting this process or learning this process. Like I said, I think we all have heard this phrase and stuff, but it's it's actually quite intricate. And once you go through these steps, it becomes quite natural.
Mhm.
But it really does start with evaluation of yourself and your emotions. So I'm not sure I have a huge other tip because I think we kind of we nailed them.
We did. And I think that, and honestly, I do believe emotions are step one. Okay, so my last question that I ask anyone that comes on here, all the people, the two so far, if you could look at yourself 2 years ago, February 12th, 2021, and give yourself either what would you have done sooner, what would you stop doing, what would you say? You're Ashton 2 years ago.
Yeah. I think it's more of an FYI. If I could have put it in my bank of knowledge 2 years ago, and that would have been that I have come to the conclusion that where you are in life right now isn't necessarily um, where you think it is. And to expand on that a little bit more, um, the thing that you feel like you're after right now, whether you're a young professional and that's career, whether you're, you know, hitting 30 and not married yet and trying to find a spouse and really putting a lot of energy into the dating world, like whatever that like main one track that you're on.
I keep looking for my spouse on Amazon and I'm not, they're out. They're sold out. So
Sold out and too
they're
expensive.
sold out. It's too expensive. Prime does not deliver.
Oh, I hate it when it's not Amazon primed.
Damn
I hate it. Um, but no, I would love to tell myself that where whatever path you think that you're creating, you could be on
it.
that path and it's the right path, but it's for a totally different reason.
Mm.
Um, you know, whether that's to build certain characteristics or to go through trials that you might not have gotten otherwise. Whether that's to build a specifically a very different specific like quality within yourself that you haven't gotten yet. I've come to find that where you're put at a specific time is probably the right place, because I definitely believe in that whole being. But I think that we don't always understand or know like what it is we're supposed to get out of this until 2 or 3 years down the road, and you look back and you're like, oh, okay, like I wasn't necessarily like advancing my career. Like I learned a couple things in that realm of my life, but in that 2 years, I truly got XYZ out of it.
Mm, that's
So I
interesting.
wish I would have had like a better perspective on that, because I think some of the things that have happened in my life in the last even 8 years, the moves and the all the other things that I've gone through, have felt just super overbearing and like making mountains out of ant hills, when I'm really just going on that path to get this other characteristic or quality that's going to help me later.
I think that's a really great way to think about that. And I can probably put that toward teaching. I worked really, really hard to restart my career in my 30s to become a teacher, and I am. And now I'm like, "God, I don't want to do this anymore, and I feel like a failure." But what if I'm a teacher because I needed to learn something or do something or grow in some way for this next step in my life? And I think sometimes exactly what you're saying, we get so fixated or focused on what I want, or, well, I made this decision and now I need to stick with it, instead of paying attention to either what it was teaching us, or maybe that decision we think is going to show up differently in something different, but we're so focused.
Yep. Yep. It's like it's like a lens. You think, and I think this is like probably most people, you spend 80% of your energy on X, right? And that's different depending on what stage of life you're in.
Yeah.
And everything else just kind of gets done in that 20%. But truly, what you're spending your 80% on might not be really truthfully what you think you're spending your 80% on.
Very good. Love it. Well, Ashton, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Please leave comments. If anyone has boundary questions, go get a book or ask Ashton or ask me. I don't know. We're all just muddling through. But I appreciate you coming on and all of our years of friendship. And
Thanks.
thank you.
This has been absolutely amazing. I'm so excited to hear all the other episodes of Go Ask Sawyer, because Jamie is so full of knowledge and
Yay!
life.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to let you go enjoy Colorado, and it's 50 degrees in Wisconsin today, so people are going to get crazy. I got to go get my
Crazy.
shorts.
Go get crazy in February.
All right. Bye, dear. I love you.
Love you.
Have a beautiful day.
See you soon.